Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm Joel Silverberg with Mark Medley, author of the book The Same River Twice, which you can check out now. And we'll get more into that in a little bit. But Mark, we appreciate the time. And for anybody that may not know, tell us about yourself.
Yeah, well, I'm first a husband and a father, pastor, a teacher, an author, recording artist. Done quite a few things career-wise in the past. I was an engineer at a nuclear power plant. I was a jazz major and gigged as a jazz musician for a while. I studied theology, and for the past 30 years I've been on pastoral staff at a Trinity Community Church here in Knoxville, Tennessee. And I think the thing that has happened recently is I've kind of honed in on the bullseye of my heart passion, and that is training leaders, and especially training leaders overseas. So I do a lot of traveling and training leaders in many different countries.
What can you tell us about the book The Same River Twice?
Yeah, it's an adventure. It is a wounded widower named James Merritt comes into a remote tribe in Africa, in Ghana, and he brings a humanitarian and engineering project, which he has actually created for the purpose of helping, but he ends up understanding that he's the one that gets the help at the end, in the end of the book, and so he finds himself the one rescued. So it's really a journey into an unfamiliar culture, into unfamiliar customs, but even more than that, it's a journey into the unfamiliar territory of the wounds of a fatherless heart and the road to healing of that.
What moves an author to write a book like this?
Well, that's great. I love to answer this question. This is an interesting question because I actually was homeschooling my son. We homeschooled, my wife and I homeschooled our 4 children. So our last year, my son is the youngest, and our very last year, we were trying to look for some kind of an English credit. And Zach is more of a hands-on guy than a book guy. So I'm looking for something that's more practical. We were both kind of through with grammar and, after all the homeschooling through the years, and literature. So we found this curriculum called One-Year Adventure Novel, and it takes the student through an entire school year with workbooks and videos. And you write a book. You actually write a novel in the course of a school year. So I told Zach, hey, Zach, good news. You don't have to read any books for English this year. He said, yes. So I said, but you got to write one. And he said, no. But I said, I'll write one with you. So we went through all of the hoops of the exercises in the workbook, and we did the videos. And halfway through the school year, I realized that I wasn't just doing the exercises, that something was just rising up inside of me. It was like there was a burden seeping out of me through the pages of what I was writing. And it had to do with fathers and sons and generational impact. And it really this burden came from my experience as a father and as a pastor and as an international traveler, because as a father of 4 and grandfather as well now, of 3 currently, I realized the fact that fathering is crucial. The role of a father is important. Seasons of a father's life are very different. As a pastor for over 30 years, I understand the absence of a father affects a family in such profound ways, and for generations even. And even as an international teacher, I see that this whole idea of fatherlessness, or absence of an active, healthy father, is a worldwide issue. Fatherlessness is a worldwide phenomenon. And so this is like the burden that just began to ooze out of my heart as I was writing this book along with Zach.
Mark Medley, the author of The Same River Twice. I'm interested on hearing more on this burden that you're referring to, and how have you seen that more with all the traveling you've done worldwide?
Yeah. Well, I would say that there is a largely unreported crisis in the world today. It's not an economic crisis or political crisis or a health crisis. It's actually a spiritual and generational crisis. It's a famine of fathers. And if you have a famine of fathers, then you have an abundance of orphans, you know. And so if you look at, for example, prisons, if you look at substance abuse centers, if you look at high school dropout rates, all of those largely you have this huge percentage of maybe 80 to 85% of people who are involved in those situations are from a fatherless home. And then our families, which are the very core of our society, are falling apart largely because of fatherlessness. And I mean, in the Western world, we're even dealing with, my goodness, we don't even know what gender we are. And a lot of this is largely because of fatherlessness as well. So, and there's many ways to be fatherless, you know. Of course, death can make someone, or the death of a parent can make someone an orphan, but it could also be desertion. It could be divorce. It could be drugs and alcohol. It could be that your father is present, but he's absent at the same time. It could be that he's never satisfied. You feel like you can never do enough. It could be that your father is abusive. It could be that your father is just silent and you just don't know where you stand with him. And I find that a lot of fathers, it's not that they don't want to father well, it's just that they don't know how to do it. And so they don't do it because they don't understand how to do it. So it's a really huge crisis worldwide. And orphan hearts, when you talk about people who are orphans literally, or orphan-hearted people, you're talking about people who have a problem with having a strong identity, a solid identity. There are people who live in fear. They live with a scarcity mentality. They live with this idea of, I have to perform, and my value is based on my performance. They feel abandoned. And when you know you're a son or a daughter, though, you know that you belong. And you know you have a place at the table, and that changes everything.
What sort of adventure do you take the reader on in The Same River Twice?
Well, the hero of the story, James Merritt, he embeds with an African tribe called the Sudi tribe, and he brings this invention that he actually has created. It's a water invention, and it brings this promise of a much better life for the Sudi. But he finds a crazy dysfunctional situation there in a volatile land dispute between two tribes. There's a fiery female mission worker that's there, and there's a shocking revelation from his past that he didn't know about that changes everything, and it actually causes the Sudi tribe to alter James' life much more than he will ever alter theirs. And James risks everything to redeem himself from a checkered past, to find the heart of a father, and to find out what's most important. And when he finally finds out what to live for, then he's faced with the ultimate question, which is it worth dying for?
Now, you've done your homework on this as well. You've taken multiple trips to Africa. You've been to Ghana. So for those who may not know, going through this book, what is an African village like? Yeah,
that's a great question. You know, Africa, when you've been to Africa, you just can't hardly get it out of your soul. It's really hard to get that out. It's a beautiful place. And I wanted to wrap this message of healing between fathers and sons in a compelling story that really honors the African culture. So during the process of the book, which took 7 years to write, by the way, I made 5 trips to Africa. And part of those trips were studying culture. They were studying history, studying food and customs and things like that. And a lot of those things I have incorporated into the book. And a couple of examples that show a great contrast and kind of help you understand what's going on in the book. There's a beautiful African ceremony called an outdooring. And an outdooring is where the infant child, 8 days old, usually they wait till 8 days old because they want to make sure the child's still alive, staying with them, because of infant mortality rates. And they will bring this child out for the very first time and present the child to the community and speak the name of the child for the very first time. And it is welcoming. First of all, the father takes responsibility for the child. It's a welcoming of the child into the father and into the family and into the community. And it's a beautiful service. But at the same time, in the same region, you have this slave trade going on still today. Unfortunately, young boys in Ghana are still traded into slavery or sold into slavery on the Volta River and the Volta Lake. Now, the Volta River is actually like a main character in the book. So it's in every chapter. And the Volta River is actually 3 rivers that come into one. And there's a system of dams that make the Volta Lake, which is the largest man-made lake in the world, actually. And on this lake, there's a huge fishing industry. And what happens is, although it's outlawed, it's against the law, still the boats, the men who have the fishing businesses will either deceive or talk parents into trading or selling their children into this years worth of slavery. It's literally slavery that's still going on today. They just don't have enough law enforcement to enforce the laws. But so you have, on one hand, you have, for example, a little 8-day-old girl who's being welcomed into a family and a community, and in the same situation, same area, you have young boys that are given up, they're betrayed, or they're deceived, or they're sold by their families into slavery. And it's a really sad thing, but those are the type of cultural things that I include in the book.
Mark Medley, the author of the book, The Same River Twice. What else makes this book so unique?
Well, I think that it builds a new world. I think that a lot of people haven't been to Africa. They haven't been embedded into a village like this. And I try to paint a picture of the village life that's very accurate, the customs that are accurate, the history that's included into this. What's it like to be in a tribe? What is the function of a chief and the elders of a tribe? And I was able to talk with a chief there when I went to Ghana, and to understand more about how that works, and the political intrigue that goes on as well. So you've got a brand new culture. So it's a journey for the reader into a brand new place where they've never been. And also there's kind of a tension here of, you have this calm village life, which is different, very different than what you experience here, in our culture. But then in that calm village life, there's also this tension of this tribal land dispute that's going on between the rival tribes, political intrigue that's going on. There's a little bit of romance going on because there's this fiery female mission worker. And also there is a revelation in the middle of the book, an impossible coincidence that happens that changes everything for the hero and turns the story on its head. And I would also say, in terms of the format of the book, it's a unique kind of novel because each chapter starts with a chapter page that has a picture of Africa. Many of those pictures I took on my trips there, and some kind of a quote that has something to do with the chapter as well.
Fathers, sons, generations, a lot of discussion about that. What scriptural insights will the reader see in The Same River Twice into those things?
Yeah, I think if you know that you're a son or a daughter, and you have a place and you belong and you're not abandoned, that changes everything. And we understand that Jesus came to bring many sons to the Father. We understand that it changes our prayer life, our Father in heaven. We understand that it changes our worship. We worship the Father in spirit and truth. So all of those things change who we are. and how we live our lives. But beyond that, God himself, he self-identifies as a father. When he reveals himself to us, it is as sovereign Lord, but it's also as Father, relational, not just transcendent and beyond us and unapproachable, but relational and intimate. And so when you see that, and the fact that God in his very nature, he has generations. In the Trinity itself, there's a Father and a Son and a Spirit. So you have generations are not just an important thing to God, they're part of his very nature. They're who he is. So to understand him is to understand his heart for generations. And I think also if you think about what God puts in our hearts, the dreams that God puts in our hearts, many times those things can never be actually realized without the next generation. I think of David and Solomon, because David had this burden in his heart to build the house of the Lord. And God wouldn't let him do it because he was a man of war. But he said, your son will do it. So David gathered all the materials, and David made all the plans. And David charged his son before the people to build the temple. And he charged the people to get behind his son and build it. And Solomon did do that after the death of his father. But the thing that was in the father's heart was not possible without the next generation. And if we don't pour our age into youth, so this is really talking about spiritual generations, mentoring, or spiritual fathers and spiritual mothers. If we're not pouring our age into youth, we're not going to see the things that are in our hearts actually come to pass. I think also that it's crucial to understand that it's not just about fathers, it's about mothers. Spiritual mothering is just as important as spiritual fathers. And so it's not gender specific, and probably the last thing I would say is fathering isn't for cowards. A father sacrifices everything for his sons or his daughters.
Husband, father, musician, pastor, jack of all trades, everything. Mark Medley right here, author of the new book, The Same River Twice, which is available now. And where can viewers purchase the book?
Yeah, you can go to Amazon.com, and the book's available in print form. It's available in Kindle, and it's also available in audio format on Audible.com and on iTunes. So you can get it there.
Mark, it's been great. Appreciate the time and really looking forward to it. And hopefully everybody takes time to check out the book.
Yeah, thanks a lot.